Yeah, that's
Jen,
perfect.
Is it Mundia or Mundia?
You could say Mundia. Yeah,
Mundia.
it's fine. My parents are Kenyan, so they say it very differently than I do. So.
Mundia. It's one of those things with accents, like your
Hmm.
what the things that you I suppose accentuate where you put
Yeah,
your
yeah. The
highlights on are
emphasis.
different.
Yeah.
Yes, emphasis. Thank you.
Yes.
They're always different.
And it's fine. All of the good thing about all of my names, my artist name, my last name, my first name, they're all very phonetic. So
Mm.
generally, you're probably saying it kind of right.
Okay, good.
You know what I'm saying? You're probably getting the words in the right order, even if you got the emphasis on the wrong syllable. You know what I'm saying?
Well done. I could not have done that. Tricky shit. Jen Mundia, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
We were supposed to meet about this time last year, I think.
Yeah, I guess it was going to be the next show
Yes,
for
it
us.
was. Well, yes, it was the next show, and unfortunately, wasn't our last because the one before that was our last. But
Hmm.
yeah, I was very upset that we had to obviously postpone that show, and at the time we thought, cool, we'll postpone it a month or two. Little
Hmm.
did we know. And obviously, things have changed dramatically in the last year. You have also
Hmm.
moved to LA, so
Hmm.
lots and congratulations on your move. That's very exciting.
Thank
And
you.
how long were you in New York before you moved?
It's a complicated question.
Oh,
I was there for, let's say, 8 years, but I actually moved to New York right after college for a couple of years, and then I left for 5, and then I came back for 8.
okay. So
So I'm
that's a
65 years old.
that's a long distance intermittent love triangle relationship with the city, isn't it?
Literally. And there was, there was the actual fake romance in between and all of that stuff. So yeah, New York is definitely someplace I never thought I'd go back to. It's like leaving school when you think, oh, if I leave college, I'll never come back. I never
Mm.
thought I'd come back. And then literally I moved back so fast that my friends thought that I was visiting for the weekend. I said something about like my apartment. They were like, what do you mean? I was like, yeah, I moved here. Yeah.
Brilliant. Do you miss it at all? Because you said you moved in September of 2020.
Yeah, I do. You know, when I missed it was the election, the day that we found out that Joe Biden was president. Because I'm in Inglewood, so I'm not downtown LA or anything. So my
Mm.
roommate and I were like celebrating, just the two of us in our apartment. And I was watching everybody's Instagram stories of like the madness in the streets. And I was like, dang, that was the first time I really missed New York.
Yeah, I mean, being here, it was just this huge. I mean, I'm sure people have told you, but the relief and just emotional release of it all was
Hmm.
crazy. And
Hmm.
everyone felt it, and literally everyone kind of went out onto the streets, and it kind of felt like the end. Do you remember those pictures of like the end of World War II? And
Hmm.
like, there's that
Hmm.
beautiful picture in Times Square, and it's
Hmm.
probably some sailor assaulting some young woman by kissing her. That's
Yeah.
probably how we would view it now. But you kind of excuse it because it was just sort of that joyous,
Hmm.
and it
Yeah.
definitely felt like that. But
I was jealous.
not of the sailor woman. You
Of
mean
her
from
too,
New York?
yeah.
Okay, sure, fine.
I'd like a big fat kiss.
Same. That's why I have dogs. So we're going to talk about your single Wildfire.
Hmm.
Super excited to talk about it.
Hmm.
So when did you release Wildfire?
I believe it was May
Oh yeah,
2020.
that's
Time's
okay.
blurring.
Things
May or
don't.
June.
We don't have to be super current, but it was the first single that you released under your new. Were we calling it a pseudonym
Yeah, that's a very fancy word, but yes, that's what we would call it.
or a moniker?
Ooh, yeah. Yeah. I can't spell either of those words, so whichever one. As long as we're just talking about
I
it.
can't spell either of them either. Um, and your moniker is
Hmm.
Esabalu. Am I saying
Esabalu,
that right?
yes,
Esabalu.
yes,
Thank
yeah.
you.
When
Sorry.
we talked about emphasis. It's all good.
Yes, Esabalu. Now I'm underlining the A. So what made you decide to pick a new moniker and start releasing music under that?
I had planned to do that before COVID, and I had this name in my mind, and my producer and I were talking about it, and it was going to be Siren with a Y. And I was like, no one else has that name. And I looked up on Spotify and I was like, no one has that name. And so for some reason, I didn't see it. And then, of course, I went back like 2 months later and there's a million sirens, of course, female singers, you know what I mean?
Right.
And then, he was down, he liked it, but I was just like, oh, this isn't going to work. And then by the time I was trying to change over, um, because my idea in my mind was that I would just be kind of starting fresh, starting with a new idea, creating this new body of work, because Jen Mundia is attached to many things. Like I used to work at Olive Garden in Times Square. I used to work at Best Buy. I have a LinkedIn profile. It's just attached to so many things. I've had a million jobs and,
Yeah.
I've done a lot of things and I'm proud of those things. But I think in terms of my artistry, it was kind of time to like go full into, it's funny because it's like almost me going fully into myself, but calling myself something different. And so I kind of thought about it for a while. I meditated on it, and that name came to me. So this Esabalu is the village where my grandmother lives, my
Oh.
dad's mom. And so I called my mom because we're very close. And I was like, can I use that name? What do you think? And I was jazzed about it. And then she's like, you got to ask your dad because that's his mom. You know what I mean? And I was like, ah, because my dad and I don't even talk like that. And so I like called him a few days later and I was like, what do you think? And we talked for like a couple of hours and he told me, and I took all these notes. He was telling me, I like learned more about my family history in Kenya than I had ever learned.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it was kind of like a connection point for him and I when we don't really we talk about the weather, you know what I mean? And so it was really cool to just like talk to him and have him be really excited to share that with me. And like it kind of made me feel I know this is right now. Like it's all kind of sinking into place. And a lot of things that have come about since I started that pseudonym have felt really kismet. Like they felt like they just kind of fell into place. Um, and it just has been indicative of like the first moment that I started the name.
It's funny sometimes when you do something like that, which is really kind of coming into yourself, and you hadn't maybe, I don't want to say dared to do it, but you hadn't, maybe there was something holding you back from doing that before, and now you've like fully embraced it, and suddenly all of these opportunities are popping up and
Yeah.
presenting themselves to you, and that's
Yeah.
the sort of the universe
It's the universe, baby. And
doing its
I
thing.
think for me, Jen Mundia was kind of like I can always stop because I'm always going to be Jen Mundia. That's on my birth certificate. But like when you pick a different name, it's like this is a thing, right? And people even like we had this conversation before we started taping. You were like, "What should I call you?" Like people really will step into it. Like I had a podcast interview back when Wildfire was brand new, and he just immediately called me Esabalu. You know what I mean? And I was like, "Oh, like I can do this," you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of even when you said, "What do you want me to call you?" I was like, "Let's talk about it," because like I'm not lying to anybody that as if I'm not Jen anymore. It's just this is something else that I'm doing, and like I can step into that when I want to.
It's interesting. Until we just talked about this, I hadn't even put it together. So I changed my name to Stevie.
Uh huh.
So
Uh
I
huh.
was formerly known as Steph.
Uh huh.
Previously on the podcast, I've been known as Steph, and I have decided, to embrace a non-binary existence, and
Love
I've
it.
gone with Stevie. And it's, when I said it's interesting what happens and how more comfortable and authentic you feel in that name, I hadn't actually put that together. That was exactly the same thing that you did, but yet with an artist name.
Yeah, I love that parallel. When did you decide to make that change?
Very recently.
Yeah. You feel good about
Um,
it?
I do. I feel really good
Yeah.
about it. I mean, I'd say it's probably it's not everywhere yet.
Yeah.
I think I started thinking about it maybe a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I just had analysis paralysis of, oh my god, where do I start with this? Do I start it on Instagram? Do I start
Yes.
it on
Oh my
Facebook?
God. Yes, you
You
get
know,
it.
yeah,
Were you
totally
were you scared?
terrified.
Yeah.
I'm utterly terrified.
Yeah.
The funny thing was, I had a conversation. This is turning into it being about me. This is not
Because
about me.
I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued, and I want to know.
I think the funny thing was I had a conversation with my dad, and I was very nervous to talk to my dad about it because
The
Stephanie was
parallels.
yes, the parallels, right? But Stephanie was a name that, he and my mum had chosen for me. And stupidly, I felt by choosing a different name for myself that I was somehow rejecting a choice that they had made for me. And, to in some weird way, a life choice that they had made for me. So yeah, telling my dad I was so nervous about it. And then eventually I got to a place where I was like, no, I can tell him. And he was brilliant. And it was really funny. He, I think I told him about, about my identity first. And then he called me up the next week and said, what should I call you?
Oh.
it was adorable, really,
I'm
really
gonna
sweet. And I was
cry.
like, it was lovely. It was really, really, and like that's the whole thing of, if somebody identifies in a different way as you do,
Yeah.
what should I call you? Or,
Yeah.
what do you prefer to be called? And like, it's really nice when somebody asks that.
Yeah.
I think there's always, for me, there's always a, oh, I feel seen moment with it.
Yes. 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 And it's funny like what people slip into. You know what I mean? Automatically. Like if somebody didn't really know you and they came on and they would just like call you Stevie because they saw it on the screen. Like it's just interesting what people will slip into once you are comfortable. It's all about you, really, right? Like you make that decision and then people follow suit. But if you aren't fully there, then like you're not really allowing other people to be, right? So
Exactly.
I love that. I love the parallels. The universe is talking.
She knows what she's doing.
Mhm.
So I love that, and I think you should go by Esabalu, but from
Okay.
now on
Okay.
forevermore. But
Good.
but anyway,
Noted.
but this is your choice, and you make your decisions. So tell me about Wildfire. Tell me about the story behind the song, first of all.
Yeah, so Wildfire was written by me and Brandon John, who also produced it, and our friend Eric Penn, both amazing songwriters and great, great guys. And I started writing with them a few years ago now. It's been probably like 3 or 4 years. And I remember a friend a friend linked me with Eric specifically, and he was like, "You got to meet my friend." But you know how it is. You've been playing music for a long time. People always be like, "You got to meet my friend. They play music," and like they're you never know what you're gonna run into, right? And maybe I shouldn't be so cynical, but like people could be, like you could be like, "Oh, that's really nice that they play music on
Like
the
that's cute.
side,"
Yeah.
right? But like as somebody who's kind of dedicated their life to music, it's like not you just never know what you're going to get. And it's also really hard. It's like creating a relationship, right? So even if that person's very musically talented, you never know if you're going to gel. And then on top of that, there's working with men. And generally, men are very, I don't even know the word to use, but they act like they do in any professional situation where they own the stage. They're there. You're like just working with them, and it's not, And so I really was nervous about all those things to the point where like I'm never late. I was late. I came, I like wasn't prepared to like, and I watched these guys write a song in like 4 minutes. And I was like, oh, cool. When did you guys write that song? And they were like, right now. And I was like, right. And so then I just became really, really nervous. And the other thing that I love about them is they all complimented me. Like it was Brandon, Eric, and our friend Bruce, and then like a couple other guys, like, people bring an entourage to the studio. And they all were like, I love Heads or Tails. I love this. They were like complimenting my songs, complimenting my voice. They're like, your voice is so dope. And that's just not something that you see. I don't care who, like what gender, whatever, like people just because of their insecurities, they don't come into a room complimenting you anymore. That's just not a thing. And so immediately I was just felt warm and at home with them. And so Eric, Brandon, and I wrote that song. And then Brandon and I started working together a few months later. And that's when we wrote Dream You, which is the second single that I put out. And like soon after, I guess this is now right before the pandemic, we were finishing up Wildfire, not knowing what was going to happen. So I finished the vocals for that on my own in my home studio in New York. And I just said, this is like an 80s bop. So what, like, it doesn't go with anything else that I've written. So let's just release a single. And it was under Esabalu. I decided, I was like, we're doing this. And I told the guys, and they were like, cool, no problem. Once again, like we just talked about, everybody was on board, right? And I told them, I was like, hey, do you mind if we release this under Esabalu? Like, tag everything as Esabalu, da 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 da. They were all on board. We talked about this as well, that it's hard to get people to transfer over. Like, I had to post things to Jen Mundia, and people still wanted to follow me there. I got the most views there, whatever. It's fine. But yeah, we basically wrote this 80s bop and decided to release it as a single, and it did pretty well for me to be releasing it on my own. And then I made a quarantine music video that I think we're gonna check out later. So that it was just like a really fun experience. And it was a really fun thing to do in quarantine because we were just all kind of pulling our hair out and going a little crazy. And I had this project to like sink myself into.
How long did this video take you? Because you've got I don't know, 4 or 5 different sort of sets or settings. You in different outfits doing different things.
Yeah, it was crazy. My friend and I were just talking about this because he wants to do some stop motion, and he was like, "How'd you do this?" I have an app, and I was like, "No, I did that all in like iMovie, like one shot at a time." Yeah, so I basically took my notebook that has like everything in it. It has like my journaling, it has my songwriting, it has like when I like stream church, it has when I like take notes for like on like seminars, and I just started writing like I don't know what you even call it because I'm not an actual filmmaker, but I
storyboard.
guess like yeah, storyboard. Yeah, exactly. And so I started drawing. I'm a terrible artist, like visual artist, and I started drawing like, oh, here's me on the bed, and I'm like, filing my nails, and here's like Legos, and here's me on the couch, and then also I started filming, and then my roommate at the time what left for like a week. And so I was like, ooh, I could do some kitchen shots. So then I started filming more. I ordered all these wigs. I've never worn wigs in my life. I ordered wigs from the internet. It was like stressful because it's like, oh my God, when is it gonna come? These are like $6 wigs, like real shake and go. And yeah, it was just like super fun, pretty cheap to do. And I just kept like kind of adding. I did the stop motion Lego thing, and then I was like, no, it's not good enough. And then I just like spent another 4 hours the next day doing it again. So yeah, it was just like I said, it was a great project for what May, like when we were still kind of like, how long is this gonna last? And we were going a little stir crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the vibe.
We weren't COVID fatigued at that point. We were like, oh, I could do a few things just to keep me tied over.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I love the description of it as it's an exciting journey into the past, forgetting about your cares and diving headfirst into a steamy summer of love. Now, it's one of those where we all laugh at what we write, but like I do love that because it like you've given me this sort of like past 80s vibe. It's very much, got that love feel about it. But the video,
Yeah.
and we'll take a watch in just. I'm used to saying we take a listen. We'll take a watch in just a second. But I kind of get such a self-love, self-care feeling from it.
Yeah.
So it's curious that you're like, the song is sort of about diving into a love experience. And I think, the way that I'm interpreting most of the video, it's hard because it goes on, there's a few kind of different streams to it, or threads to it. But I do think there's sort of a lot of like self-love that you're putting in there.
Yeah, I had originally had an opening scene where I was on the phone with somebody, and I just decided not to do it. I don't know if it was like I thought it was too corny, or I kind of want the song kind of hits you right away with like the tom drums, and you're just feeling 80s right away. So I didn't really want people to have to wait for that, and so I cut that scene. And so I don't know how coherent the storyline is, but it definitely ended up being just like a fun self-care moment. And also I hate bios because really, I don't know if people know this about artists, but you have to write your own bios. So like all the shit that you hear when somebody's like introducing you, that person wrote it. And it's so annoying because you're like have to brag about yourself. It's like you have to give people what you think they want to hear, but you also like are just like, am I really saying this shit about myself? Steamy summer love, like whatever. But it's like, what would I say?
Comedians do their own walk-ups. It's no different. It is no different.
I hate it.
Please welcome. It's no different.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's take a watch of the video.
Okay, cool.
I'll see if I can get this to work.
Yeah, this is exciting. This is your first time playing from YouTube, right?
Yes, it is.
What if there's like an ad?
Shush, there will not be an ad. I'll take us out of this. There we go.
I don't have to close my eyes to see a dream in you. I won't let a day go by without getting some from you. The perfect rendezvous. We can't run from what we've done. can't stop loving you if I wanted to. Wildfire, I don't wanna get away from loving you. I wouldn't be running if I only knew that I can't stop loving you if I wanted
I love it.
Thanks.
I love it. I especially love that 80s guitar, like at the end.
BJ Brown, downtown BJ Brown, shout out.
But we were like messaging whilst that was playing, and like I kept giggling. Like the more I watch it, the more I giggle through it. Like you're just having so much fun.
For real, I had a lot of fun. And it was funny because you know how I'm sure you've done like videos here and there, and it takes a long time to edit a video. And so you have to watch things over and over and over again. And it was, I laughed like on time 100, I laughed. It was like so much fun to make.
I hate doing videos. I always feel so awkward doing them. But I think when I'm doing something for myself, I'm not judging myself quite as much. So it's somehow slightly easier. Did you find that? Because I mean, you're singing to a pan. You're doing like your glute bridges.
I love a glute bridge. Yes.
Oh, I hate glute bridges. Oh, so painful. But like I love, and you're just making fun of yourself a little bit.
Oh my God, 100%. Like all day. Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to be silly and cute, and I had never really done anything like that before, and it was just so fun. Like like I said, don't wear wigs, and it was like we're in the middle of this pandemic. I put on fake lashes in my apartment, like you know what I'm saying? Like it was just like over the top fun.
Oh, I've done catwalk shows for myself. I've awarded myself Grammys on a Saturday night after a few gin and tonics. I'm not judging.
Yes.
Not only Grammys, I think I won an Oscar.
Wow, you were
Yeah.
going for that EGOT.
Totes.
The-
Super
the
talented.
apartment
over here.
EGOT.
Absolutely. There were one or two things that I just wanted to point out. There was a couple, you put on a couple of t-shirts during that video. And one is a quote by Issa Rae, rooting for everybody black. And the other one is very black and very proud.
Yeah.
I think you could probably say that one of those by itself, that could just be your favorite t-shirt, but two of them together, I think there's a message. Not that.
Yeah. I mean, the first message was Issa Rae, call me. I want to be your friend and I want you to put my music in your show because
Got
shout
it.
out to Issa Rae. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it was necessarily like I'm black and I'm proud, like in terms of a political statement, but it was more like I think part of it was representing these black owned businesses that are selling this apparel, so I could tag them and people could potentially buy. But also, yeah, that's something I am proud of, being black, and here I am being black in my apartment and being ridiculous. So here's a message about it, you know?
Yeah, it was, a beautiful black woman just owning her music and her stuff and just loving it.
Boom.
It's cool.
That's it. Yeah.
I loved it. I do want to ask a question about obviously 2020 and social justice. How has, but with regard to music, and I just want to ask has anything changed for you in terms of some of the things that you have been asked to do music-wise? Some of the, I don't know, whether there have been like virtual shows that you've done or anything that you've been asked to get involved in, and has that felt different for you in a positive way, or?
Yeah, I mean, shows are limited because of the pandemic, but I did, obviously see an uptick. It was kind of like July or whenever George Floyd was murdered was like Black History Month again, where everybody's like, can you play this? And can you do this? And you want to talk about this? And, which was like, I had to just give myself the grace to be able to say no. And I'm a Virgo, so I feel like I don't generally, I'm not opposed to stacking my schedule and saying yes to everything, and I can take on it all, apparently. And that was a month where I decided to, say no to some people, and not even if I felt, oh, I'm being used in this way, but just more like I am allowed to say no, with who I'm working with what I'm putting my energy towards, with who I feel like is pandering towards me. And I think that is not something that I regret because, at the end of the day, like that's not my work to do. If somebody's asking me to do a show because they want to make themselves feel better about their lineup, then that's like not really my work to do. Like, even if I do want to represent Black people well, and I know that what I do well,
Mm.
it's other people's turn to kind of step up to the plate
Yeah.
and, make things right within themselves, whether that's like internal work or how they represent themselves.
Yeah. Good answer, and I'm glad that you felt you can say no. I think saying, having the ability within yourself to say no is hugely important, and gives you that space to step back and recharge after after everything that happened last year. It must have been nice to just be like, actually, I need to take time.
Yeah, it was interesting because I feel like, like I said, I was in New York for 8 years and there's been lots of Black Lives Matter protests. And I had a lot of white friends that never came with me. And then I saw them on the street, in the summer.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, like that's cool. And that was, I talked to my therapist about it. I was feeling really terrible because I was like, I'm not ready to go outside like that in a group yet. And I think the numbers showed because it was all outdoor protests that they didn't skyrocket at that time, thankfully.
Yeah.
But I was very anxious and I felt terrible because I was like, I should be out there, but I'm not ready. And she was like, she told me that I could be a storyteller, you know what I mean, and use my voice. And that was helpful. And my friend has been. Oh, is that my phone talking to me?
I think so.
My
Sounded like
friend.
someone went, "Hey Jen."
Yeah, right. What was
Is
that?
that what your message tone is? Hey Jen,
I
you
think
got a
that was
message.
Siri.
Oh.
Yeah, I was like, where is that coming from? Maybe I said Siri. She's probably gonna start talking to me again.
Maybe
But yeah,
serious.
right.
Maybe.
But a good friend of mine ended up creating a project about allies. So she interviewed. It's not out yet, which is interesting because we did this back in the summer. But she interviewed four white men in the music industry and just kind of talked about like their position being in, and they're specifically in hip hop. So their position and maybe like the roles that they've taken over their careers. And this is like famous DJs and all this stuff. And I created a song for it. Brandon and I again created a song for that called "Say Their Names." I'm really proud of that song. And since the project hasn't been released yet, that's out on Spotify and all that good stuff. But I haven't really uh, done any promotion for it because I'm kind of like I want to honor that project before kind of releasing it out into the world fully. And that was really therapeutic. That was one of those moments where I like lit candles in my room and like I had a good cry. And it's weird because like she is working on this creative project, so she was giving me notes, and we were both kind of like feeling a little weird about it as Black women, where we're both professionals, right? So she's giving me as a creative director and as somebody who does a lot of ad work, she's giving me notes on this thing that's like kind of both breaking our hearts.
Right.
So yeah, that was kind of one of the things that helped me release. And when my therapist was like, you can be a storyteller, that helped me put that into that project. And I think those things kind of they come out as they can, right? Like even the name Esabalu. Like I remember I went to Kenya in 2012 and I was like, this trip is going to mean something to me. And I just can't process it all right now. And I spent years thinking like, when is this going to meet? Like I knew it was important. My siblings and I cried a lot. It had been so many years since we'd been home. But I just thought like, okay, I guess that just was what it was. And then all of a sudden in 2020, this name comes to me and all these things come to me and all my family. Like when these songs get released and they see how well they're doing, my family in Kenya is like, you're doing the Esabalu name proud. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like how I feel about Say Their Names, where it's like that came when it needed to come, right? And even if no one else ever hears it or whatever, it was very important to me. And that's like I think kind of the thing. It's these things that are happening right now are less about me being performative and more about me just expressing myself when I need to.
Yeah. I mean, as artists, we are the storytellers, right? And leaning into that as a way of processing
Exactly.
is so helpful.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Just on that, so you went to Berklee to study music, and in your bio that you wrote yourself,
Hate it.
you know that you're an audio producer as well. What's it? I mean, did you train to be an audio producer, or what was the trajectory? Let's call it.
Yeah. So it all ties in. That's how life works. So I always sang. I wanted to sing. I was originally going to go to college for musical theater because I was in North Carolina and that's really all there was. In terms of being a professional like opera or theater. And I loved it. I loved theater. I was in musicals in high school and I enjoyed that. But then my friend went to Berklee summer program the summer
Hmm.
before our senior year, and she was like, "Jen, you gotta go to You gotta like check out Berklee." I haven't even heard of it, because I'm like 16 from North Carolina, like a small little town called Apex, and I just really didn't. I know, a lot of musicians grow up knowing about Berklee and dreaming about Berklee, but I didn't know about
Right.
it. And so Kyla went to Berklee summer program 5 weeks, which is funny because later when I went to Berklee, I was an RA for the 5 week program and took care of those little kids. But she was like, "You got to go to Berklee. Like, you just sing and you like create songs with people and da da da, all this stuff." And so I looked it up and I went and I auditioned for like theater programs in North Carolina. And then I somehow got on a plane to Boston, even though my parents had no money. And I auditioned, or I went to audition and I got snowed out. So then my parents had to come with more money to get me on another plane a few months later to audition. Berklee gave me like 6 cents towards my tuition. I was like so excited that I got a scholarship, but like in the grand scheme of how expensive Berklee is, it was
Mm.
basically nothing, which is fine. I felt like somebody just forgetting something. And I went, yeah. And so my thought in my mind was I can't go to school for performance because the school is so expensive.
Right.
And so I went and I was like, I'm going to study audio engineering. And Berklee at the time, I don't know what it is now, but it was 24% female. And the audio engineering program was like, I mean, it like 4 women.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, in terms of women in audio production, I
Yeah.
think the number is something or like 3% or something in terms of like
Yeah.
professional now.
Yeah. And I mean, that was a thing that was in my mind and we talked about it. But honestly, there were a decent amount of audio engineering teachers. So that was nice because they definitely
Hmm.
like find the women and they're like, what's up? What are we doing?
Yeah.
And then also, I didn't really have a problem. The only thing that I think got me kind of in my head was that a lot of people who go to Berklee go later in life. So they're like they left high school, they went to undergrad maybe even, and then they're
Hmm.
like there at 25. And I went to Berklee at 17.
Wow.
Yeah, I was 17 and like I turned 18 like my first week there. And so, you know what I mean? That's the only thing. Like these
Mm.
people have like worked in studios. They have all the gear. They have money to buy more gear. So like they give you like a laptop and this is part of your tuition, but like they give you a laptop and they give you a little M box. So you have a little interface and they give you Pro Tools. So like, but these dudes were coming in with, like plugins and like extra, like they had their own, some guys had their own home studios in their apartment.
Yeah.
And that stuff costs a lot of money. And I didn't even know to do that. So
Hmm.
anyway, in my mind, I said, I'm not going to go to school for performance. So, like, Berklee, you have to perform a bit. You have to have an instrument. So I went for voice. You have to do a certain amount of lessons. You have to do a certain amount of ensemble. So I did sing, I did perform, but it wasn't my focus. Like I was a total studio rat. I worked in the studio office. I would always, because I worked in the studio office, I would always book like the 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. slot when no one else wanted it. And I'd work on like my remix project. And then I graduated and I went to New York, like I said, right away. And I went to studios. It took me a while to even get into a studio because I was so scared. And I just was like, no, I don't want to really do this, which is crazy. And like part of it was, I will say, like a lot of my friends were going into the big studios and those studios were closing because this is 2007. This was like the end of analog consoles. This was the end of major studios. Like everything was starting to be in the box in your home. That was the beginning of it. Was like when I started my
Right.
career was like when everybody was like, oh, we could do this from home. So it was like kind of a nightmare time to start a career in audio engineering. And also I was scared. I was a woman. I was a Black woman. And like when you do go to those big studios, you are a runner for years. And those, like I said, studios were closing.
Mm.
So it was just like I was there. I was in New York for like a year and a half, and I worked in a couple of studios as like an intern, and I was like a space bar girl, is what they call it. You're just kind of like sitting there, like, like, hey, we're gonna record, and I would work with people who were songwriting, which you've written songs like these people, like a lot of R&B artists will write songs and record at the same time, and you're just sitting there basically watching somebody write a song, which of course for a songwriter is torture. And so I left. There's other things in between, but yeah, I left New York after a little while.
Hmm.
And yeah, that was the trajectory. in the very beginning. I don't know if you like we can fast forward or whatever.
Not at all. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
And I guess it must have been, to be able to produce your own music, I think, in today's world is so important. So obviously you're ahead of the game than many people having to just figure out GarageBand and do a track here and there and whatever, and just for the sake of it before you can kind of go into a studio. But yeah, and going into a studio, if you could, the few that there are, can be ridiculously expensive, and you often don't have the cash to do it. So if you're able to, people do release music literally made in their bedrooms and living rooms, and it can do well. Like if you know what you're doing, it can certainly do well.
I mean, this whole pandemic, that's what I've been doing.
Exactly. There's literally, I mean, there's no shame in it, and I feel like there probably was a lot of shame in that before.
I think it was like there was a point when it was niche, like, oh my God, so and so made this whole album. Even like, oh, Bon Iver went to the woods and created an album, or you know what I mean? That's still like, it's kind of like, it's kind of, there's a moment for things like, right, oh, Chance the Rapper, he's unsigned, he had all this success, right? So there's like a moment for those things, and then it passes. So there's like this moment before where it's like, you made that where? And then there's a moment where it's like, yo, this person won a Grammy with their home album. And then it's a moment when everybody's doing it. So it's like, you have to find those moments in history.
Yeah. Or there's got to be some gimmick about it, like, oh, I did this with one mic in one living room. Or
exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for sharing that. That's an interesting perspective. I certainly don't get to hear from that many female producers, and certainly fewer even like Black female producers. So it's definitely a niche that you're in. But I do want to just, as we wrap up, so you've recently got picked up by Ulta Beauty for an ad sync, which is exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So what is next for you? So you've moved out to LA. Are you still... The pandemic is still on, so it's kind of hard to find your way on the scene in an IRL #IRL sense.
Yes.
So, how are you doing that, and what's the plan as and when the world resumes?
Yeah, I mean, my next thing is I'm producing my own project, a 5-song EP as of right now. It'll be 5 songs. And it's funny, imposter syndrome is a bitch, because I'm like over here, like with a whole ass degree from Berklee, worried about producing my own thing, because for so many years I've been, kind of lending my voice to projects. And even if it's a co-write, it's still me handing things over to someone, right? So now I'm in this process where I'm recording songs that were written a little while ago and grabbing the files, like project managing everything, organizing like players and all this stuff, and it's super fun, but it's like I'm paying for it, because it's like, it's, you know what I mean, like I'm somebody who likes to be in charge, but I've just realized that for so many years I have just been like, oh, here are the vocal files, right, or here's the song, or here's the scratch guitar track, right,
and you're directing.
Now I'm, yeah, exactly. And now I'm like, okay, so like even today I was talking to my good friend, I don't know if you know Christine Kruta of Little Kruta. She's doing a string arrangement on one of my songs that I'm really excited about, and I just like love her dearly, and just being able to work with her and being able to kind of like take control of that situation and be like at the helm is really exciting, because the last project we did was the Metallica album that was all strings, and that was really cool. But even then, it's like I walk in, I sing, and I leave, put some like fake lashes on and you go, right? So there's like a video component or whatever. But now it's like, okay, cool. Like I'm organizing. I've hired an arranger, and like now I'm organizing studio time, and it's really fun, because I was telling my roommate that it reminds me of being back at Berklee. Like it almost feels like a school project as opposed to like, because I just haven't. And even when I was at Berklee, I produced like friends. Like I didn't really produce myself, And so this is like a full band project, and I'm really nervous but really excited. So that's kind of the next thing for me. And then we talked about this earlier, but I have a Wildfire that we listened to is in the Uploaded contest that was supposed to be in Dublin, but it's not, and that's on Thursday, and I'm sure by the time this airs it'll be long gone. But yeah, like just things like that, kind of getting myself into like putting myself out there for competitions and all that stuff. And in terms of the LA scene, it's really funny, because I've been co-writing and collaborating with people out here, and it's like, we could have done this, guys. We've been in lockdown for a year, but people really will respond to you being in a different geographic location. So like I've been co-writing with a couple of guys for sync work, and I've been trying to work on some some deals out here that like are not finished, so like I'm not gonna speak on them too much, but like um it's just interesting because like people will say that to me. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, like they're LA based, which shouldn't really matter, but it does because you're here." And it's just like so funny because just me moving my body out here, even though I have not seen anybody barely, has changed who I'm in touch with. So
So
I'm
funny.
curious to see what will happen when venues open back up, like and get to see the scene. And like I'm sure it's similar to New York, where a lot of places are not going to open back up. So
Yeah,
you
I
know what I'm
know.
saying?
I'm wearing my T-shirt.
Yeah.
Very, very hopefully.
How are they doing?
Rockwood Musical. For if you are listening to this podcast, I'm wearing a Rockwood Musical T-shirt.
Yeah.
They seem to be doing really well. I was
Yeah.
actually hoping to chat with Matt Curry. I might have to edit this out of the podcast, but he he has declined at this stage. I think just because they're not really sure
Yeah.
what direction they're going to go in and
Yeah.
how things are going to go. But I think they've, from what I've seen and the way that they have pivoted, I think they've done a wonderful job.
Yeah.
Having people come and do live shows at stage 2. But unfortunately, I mean, they're only really able to do one show a night. So yeah, it's a shame, and it really breaks my heart. And I played the 15-year anniversary in last February. Did you play it as well?
No, I think my friend Freddie played it though. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Like, I remember being hurt. I was like, all these people, I've been playing Rockwood for years. But yeah.
And a few weeks later, we're shut. And it was, and the show that we were planning on doing for the was at Rockwood, and it was stage 3 and all, and which is one of my favorite stages. It's super intimate.
That was my last show. Was at Rockwood stage 3.
Was it?
Yeah,
It's just
January.
it's a brilliant venue. There are very few venues I think in New York where you can hear live original music and hear it in an intimate setting. There's Joe's Pub, which I mean it's a bit bigger, but you still kind of get that intimate feel to it.
Yeah.
The City Winery, which is a bit bigger, but it does feel quite intimate. It's but Rockwood 3 is super intimate. Like I've seen some of my favorite artists, and like it's just 55 seat capacity.
Yeah.
And you just you're packed in there, and you're so up close and personal, and it's such a unique experience. And I, have everything crossed, and I believe in them as a venue. And
that would be wild
if
we would really have some feelings if they close, because everybody's got to play Rockwood. It's your rite of passage as a New York City musician. To the point where people are like sick of it. They're like, "Oh, Rockwood!" Like we go to the same 3 venues every Friday night.
But that's kind of the problem with New York, in that so many original music venues have closed, and people want butts and seats, and butts and seats are going to be covers bands, in Irish pubs, and it's killing it. It's killing the scene.
It's true. It's so true. We're praying
Sorry,
for you,
you got me
Rockwood.
Yes, we are. Let's end on an up note. Esabalu, it has been a pleasure to talk with you.
Likewise, Stevie.
Thank you. I'm so sorry it's taken so long, but I needed a break. I had to say no. Another parallel.
Yes.
I needed to step back, and now I'm super excited for this podcast, and I'm able to kind of plan things a bit better and have more meaningful conversations with people that I have wanted to have conversations with. So thank you so much for joining me and opening up to me. I appreciate it, and I wish you all the best in your new LA home.
Thank you. This is awesome.
I'll speak to you soon.